Hello there, I'm JP,
Hello there. I'm WH Park.
and we're back reviewing episode 6 of Andor, the Eye, as it's called. But first of all, how are you, mate? How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. It's actually a rare day off for me on a Tuesday because I had to actually fill in for somebody at work yesterday. So I was like, "Well, can I have 2 day off?" And they were like, "Yeah." So we were supposed to schedule this yesterday, but
Mm.
you're kind enough to move it to today. So I appreciate that. Thank you, JP.
Oh, it's a pleasure, mate. As we'll get into, this is hardly a hardship talking about this episode of television. But no, that's good. I've back in work waiting for half term, whereby next week I'd like to think I'll be somewhat refreshed and everything else by that stage. It's we're living in a Tory hellhole at the minute in this country, as you're no doubt aware. Um, I would say it dates this podcast, but it really doesn't if you're listening to it
No,
at
maybe
any
not.
point from 2010 onwards. But yes, we're here to recap and review episode 6 of Andor, the Eye. Um, First of all, I mean, I've laid my cards down. I think this is the best episode of the series by far, but it was set up that way. What's your overall thoughts on it?
I kind of have a hard time saying it's the best episode because I feel it's
Mm.
one long story. Like the story
Mm.
arc in particular feels like a big movie, like just
Mm.
broken up to 3 parts. So I would say this is obviously the climax of this arc, but I do think this arc is really good. This Aldani story arc that we're in, that we've come to an end to. I just think it sets so much up for the philosophy of Star Wars,
Yeah.
especially of the rebellion, especially epitomized by the character of Nemec.
Yeah.
And he's you didn't think this when you first meet Nemec in episode 4, but obviously he's going to be the catalyst for Cassian's kind of becoming a believer in the
Mm.
rebellion, or as opposed to just someone who's surviving on the fringes of society and just eking out whatever living he can, stealing from the empire or whatever side hustles and cons he's got running. I thought it was an amazing episode. But I think of them like this story arc as one giant story, as opposed to something that's like, say, like you're currently running the House of the Dragon, which you can easily divide into episodes.
Yeah.
But this is not, I think, easily divided into episodes in that sense, like where I can say, because it's you can't divorce it from the other 2 episodes of this story arc. So
Yeah, it is. It's like its own, like you said before, it's its own Cassian Andor movie where it's like the Aldani heist, and that's really what it is. And that's the theme of the episode. That's where we had kind of left episode 5, where they were effectively scouting, waiting to put the plan into effect that everyone else had spent months on, and he'd had 3 days to learn about. And it starts off as well. You mentioned about Nemec and having the conversation with Cassian and talking about really his manifesto, the role of the mercenaries in the galactic struggle for freedom. It's a catchy title. But yeah, he's talking about his conclusion about that. And this is where you're getting this, like, I think what I liked about this is I'm enjoying how it moves away from some of the tropes, but in particular, like at times, just creating this whole other world. The idea that this is effectively Dash Kapital, really, for the rebels at this point, and it is this like kind of like somebody's decided to kind of create a kind of manifesto for everyone to follow by, in the way of all great revolutions, isn't it? So
well, so is Nemec kind of like the Karl Marx of of Star Wars, or
he
who's
is.
the other one? I think someone mentioned Thomas Paine would be someone who
Yes.
so he's kind of like a Thomas Paine or Karl Marx of
Yeah.
Star Wars, which I think is wonderful. Yeah, I like the conversation, the opening scene, because it contrasts the 2 kind of viewpoints of people who hate the Empire. One is like the idealist in Nemec. He's writing a manifesto. He's very like, he really thinks about the philosophical side of, and kind of being very naive and talking like justice, freedom, and things like that is like things that would exist without the Empire. It's like, well, did you really live in the old Republic? Because like a lot of that shit was pretty bad too. The Empire just made it worse. But and then Cassian, he's just like he has that line where he's like talking about you're half right about like the Empire doesn't care. But when he's like, what am I wrong about? He's like, they're never gonna learn because they don't have to. He's like, you and I mean nothing to the Empire as individuals, and we never and probably never will. And then I just like this exchange. Like I just think it's so well written. Like Nemec's like, well, maybe they'll feel different after today. And then Cassian just says, be careful what you wish for. He's like, he knows, like, you don't want the full brunt of the Empire's attention on you.
Mm,
You know,
yeah,
you don't want that. And then there's that great line. He says, oh, like, Nemec retorts with like, so we should just eat their shit and be thankful. And then Cassian just leans in and just says, do I look thankful to you? And it's just great, just a
yeah.
great exchange, wonderful performances from Diego Luna. And I forget the name of the actor who plays Nemec here. I'm gonna have to look that up.
It is Alex Lawther. Who
Okay.
Did you ever watch Black Mirror?
No.
It's quite a famous episode. I want to say it's like the third or possibly fourth season, and it's called Shut Up and Dance. I don't want to say anything more about it,
Okay.
other than a kid is given instructions by mobile that he has to absolutely follow. And I won't say anything more than that because I don't want to give too much of a reveal. But that was the last time I'd kind of seen him. And I think The End of the Fucking World as well. I think he might well be in that I've never seen.
It says that here on his Wikipedia, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, just again, we talked about the casting and like how fortunate they are to like be casting so many people from the UK in this. I just think it adds such a, I don't know, like a gravitas to a lot of the performances with these really classically trained actors in there.
I mean, especially as we'll get onto it, but the chieftain of the Aldani, David Heyman, who is kind of known as a kind of like well-renowned theatre and film and television actor as well. So, and that's, for like a relatively small part, but it's interesting you're saying about like the conversations, because like obviously we're we learn about Taramin becoming being like a stormtrooper, which kind of makes sense about him leading there, about obviously with Cinta as well, as her whole family was slaughtered by stormtroopers. This is all revealed by Skeen here, who I think as well, like the actor there has to have an absolute shout out. I was looking at his Ebon Moss Bachrach, who I knew nothing about, and I think as one of the very few Americans cast in the series, or certainly non-British people, it like I think he's like kind of does a tremendous job in this episode as well. But we're it like I say, carries on that path of we're seeing them as people. We've had this time to kind of develop with them for the 2 episodes. So yeah, really good build up.
I think it was you said he's quite good in the Bear, which I've not watched.
I've not seen the Bear.
Okay,
yet.
someone told me he's quite good in the Bear. So
I've heard good things about the Bear, but at the minute my TV list is pretty full. It's going to require like something big to kind of break into there. At this point, there's a radio going, so they're able to communicate with Vel, which becomes like obviously plays into the plot heavily later on. And then we go over to Lieutenant Gorn, who effectively says that to the soldiers outside that they need to give the Dani a warm welcome in there. And, at this point, we also, what was it? We also see Cassian and everyone else joining the ranks, dressed up as rebel troopers, like kind of
Imperial troopers. But it's interesting. Like we have not seen any stormtroopers.
Yes.
So far, like
the only reference to a stormtrooper is Taramin.
Taramin, yeah, like, and he doesn't wear, but none of these guys are stormtroopers, which is interesting. I think there's a video explaining why we haven't seen stormtroopers yet in Andor. And it's kind of reminiscent of like when in the part of Solo when when Han's on the planet of Nibam, I think, like he's an Imperial trooper. He's part of the Imperial Army, but he's not wearing a stormtrooper outfit. He's wearing just like what these guys are wearing, basically a uniform with some armor plating on it and a helmet. It's like, why aren't these guys stormtroopers? I think they save stormtroopers for more important planets.
Yeah.
That's what I think. It's like, yeah, we're not going to waste stormtroopers on this
invasion and conquering type.
Yeah. Basically, they're shock troops, right? It's in
Yeah.
their name, stormtroopers. So I think they save stormtroopers for more important planets or missions or campaigns or things like that. But because like I think if they were dressed like stormtroopers, it would have made things a lot easier for them to infiltrate. But there you go.
And we
Yeah,
learn. Sorry.
So I do think we get a lot of great, like some of these cast, like these throwaway kind of dialogue scenes are great because you get to learn so much. It's like, oh, okay, we find Terramin was a stormtrooper, like you're saying. Cinta's family, she was not happy when he joined because like her family's killed by stormtroopers, and to her, she can't tell when one stormtrooper is over the other. It's a nice parallel too to like, Finn in The Force Awakens because he was a stormtrooper. And like he left the ranks of the stormtroopers like Terramin did. And it's interesting that you cast both actors playing these roles are both black. I think it's really interesting, like kind of. I don't know if there's any deliberate parallels to that, or just coincidence. But I think it's quite interesting. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think and further to that point, I mean, we end up meeting Jayhorn, who is the man in charge here. Who is there with an engineer? I can't remember the engineer's name now.
Colonel Pedigas. Partagas. Oh no, I'm trying to find him. That's Partagas is the leader of the ISB. Yeah, Stanley Townsend. Is he famous?
He isn't. I thought I will have seen him on TV. He'll have been in loads of stuff. I just never would have realised. There'll be a whole list of kind of like TV credits and stuff. Going, of course, he's that bloke. But no, he isn't. I do recognise Jayhorn from an episode of Toast of London. Sadly, Stanley Townsend. So there's the that's the only thing I can think of him in it is actually is Toast of London. But I know there's other stuff. He was playing a Muhammad El Fayed type character. Going well off track here. But he gives, like, you talk about the scenes where, like, it's very dialogue heavy. It's not action heavy, even at these points. And we get, obviously, plenty of action coming up. But the conversation about the Aldani and what he ends up saying about how they've managed to, it used to be 15,000 going up to the fields. The whole kind of, even the process when he goes out there with his wife and son to meet them. And you sort of, you're seeing these moments of, he's not going to be in this for very long, but it still shows you he's got a family life and there's dynamics at home. And they're talking about effectively with the Aldani colonialization is like the kind of bigger, the idea of this invading army coming in, taking over, like kind of swiping natural resources and lands that would have been considered sacred, as, would have happened within many indigenous communities around the world. You've got all of that going on here, and it could be easy to write them off as kind of like effectively space hippies. But I think they give it that bit more gravitas by spending that bit longer, kind of building it up. The fact that Gorn had fell in love with an Aldani woman as well, like just all of these moments of kind of really good characterization and world building.
There's a lot of, obviously the exchange of the pelts as part of the ceremony is very suggestive of like, colonialists stealing land from Native Americans, Native Canadians, and other indigenous people around the world. The way they're costumed, the Aldani are costumed is a nice mix of like, I think like kind of mountain folk in like Asia, maybe native to North America and South America, as well as kind of a European feel as well to it as well. There's elements like it's all that kind of a blending of the costuming of like different Earth cultures to create kind of like this own unique Star Wars culture, which I think is great. And the cast is very diverse of the Aldani. Like you see people of different colors in there. They're not all just white people or anything like that. You see some, I believe, some native.
But everyone looks 70s. That's still the perfection. The haircuts, like Taramin's haircut and mustaches. I was like, oh, this is glorious.
Yes, we have to remember Star Wars, the original series, the first movie was made in the 70s. So like everyone's going to have, it's like Rogue One with like all the X-Wing pilots are all like, they look like they're from like 60s or 1950s, like World War II, like a film shot in England in 1950s, like some of these classic with actors with British accents and stuff like that. It's great. I love that call to detail too. There, yeah, I just learning about the actually seeing the Aldani people and not just like, you know, our rebel heist people like dress like them. We see what they actually look like, and they have their own language and their own customs. And I love when you have writers who just put so much thought into this, and like the production people who are like, okay, what does their language sound like? Okay, let's create a language for them. Let's create what the costuming would look like for people who live in like a mountainous region that's probably pretty cold at night, and it's probably settled in the Scottish Highlands. So there you go.
I have a feeling that they must have been filming this part in the Scottish Highlands. It's the only place when looking at the locations that they filmed in. But yeah, and it comes to a head like with the scene we talked about, Lieutenant Jayhorn. Sorry, not Lieutenant Jayhorn. I think it's Commander Jayhorn, when he goes down to meet the Eldani, who he doesn't want to see.
No,
you see his wife and family, and he, you know, threatens to give his son a slap because he's 12 years old and doesn't want to go to this type of thing. And they have a ceremonial kind of like passing of pelts, which the chieftain of the Eldani later on just chucks into the fire. Like, and you can see the kind of disgust that he has to go through this process, but he realizes without it, it's just going to end up in violence. So there's like, he's kind of, his hand is entirely forced on it.
It's a great line. Our ghosts have long memories or long hands or something like that. Basically, you know, it's like another parable like we hear, like we heard from Skiing, like the axe forgets, but the tree remembers. And, you know, the chief of the Eldani is just saying like, well, we'll remember you. Don't worry.
Yeah.
You know, maybe not us personally, but our ghosts will remember you. Like, it's just this idea that the trauma of the Empire will linger on for a long time. And it's basically, he's hinting at the fermenting of like maybe a rebellion on the planet of Aldani itself against the Empire.
Yeah. And we have, after this, like after we kind of introduced the Eldani proper, we are also seeing Vel sneaking into the water with Cinta as well going on, which is, and at this point in time, Gorn decides he's sending the four rebels as the to accompany the commander back up into the building. At which point, as soon as they get him inside, that's when they turn and the guns come out and the heist is on proper.
I gotta say, there's like one point where, you know, they're trying to contact Vel, and like, you know, like they think the code names are Echo 1, Valley 1, and there's a delay because I believe Vel is scared of heights, and she doesn't want to go down, rappelling down that wall to get into the water. And like, Cinta's like, we gotta go. Just go. It's like, and like, I can't think of any other reason other than she's scared of heights. She's kind of hesitant to go down there. And I'm like, hey, you know what? If I was her, like me, the real me, I would be scared too, because I hate heights and that would scare the shit out of me.
I'm with you on that. I'm scared shitless of heights. I can't be dealing with it whatsoever in there. But it's a good moment. We have a kind of interfering as well with the radio, which I think is, if there is a kind of issue I've got from a plot perspective, is how that kind of remedies itself. I'm not sure if it makes complete sense necessarily that they're able to kind of, it's like they're not going to be able to hear it and they're fried, but somehow they manage to. But anyhow, we've got them, travailing their way in. They've pulled the guns out. However, you've mentioned him before, but and I'm just getting him up on here if I can find his name on there. Colonel Pettigar he manages to pull his gun out and is pointing it. Is it Hemmick at this point? It is.
Yeah.
Nemec. Yes, he's pointing it at Nemec, and then we see Cinta managing to come in and shoot them. At which point,
well, it's interesting because he's like saying, just let the boy go. He's not telling them to put down the weapons, surrender to the might of the Empire. And like he actually has a very, like, because he's way out of, like, he's outnumbered. Like, there's very little chance that he's going to survive this. But he doesn't pull his gun for selfish reasons. He's like, let the kid go. Like, you don't, like, let him go. Like, it's very selfless act, which I think is great, because like, you can't just assume everyone in the Empire is evil. Like, you know, a lot of them are, but not all of them would be evil. You know, and he's probably evil in his own way, but he's also like, well, listen, don't hurt. What does an innocent kid have to do with this?
This becomes like the discussion from Clerks, effectively, isn't it? With this, where he's an engineer, he's there to do a job, and somehow he's tied up with some left wing radicals who decide to blow up. So he's talking about the people who have you've seen Clerks before?
Yeah.
And I'm kind of reminded by that, but there's also again a really interesting like kind of tonal shift here, because they're threatening like unarmed civilians, and you're thinking to yourself like the possibility of killing them, like they're game for. They would have prepared for this to be the case. They may, they will have known that they would be there. And I still think there is that kind of, it's not like they treat the wife and son in any particular way that's different from anyone else. Like they just kind of, so it's that dynamic of like, this is what they're prepared to do. And that's not something you see when, one of the things you'd say with Star Wars, a lot of the characters are very moral and just.
Yeah.
But you're not seeing that kind of, this is what you'll do in these kind of desperate situations.
Well, we saw this in like Rogue One with Cassian shooting an ally of his at the beginning of that film because he wouldn't be able to get away from the stormtroopers, and he can't let this guy talk to the Imperial forces, so he shoots him. Like, and he doesn't like, that's something he had to do to protect the sanctity of his mission, because fighting the Empire is the most important thing. And it's like in that film we see like that journey of him, kind of like climbing out of it with the help of Jyn Erso's character. And I think this is where we, what I like about this show is like we see like the seeds of that character planted here. Like, he's already kind of really toughened and hardened as a criminal kind of already, but like we're gonna see him go maybe even further, and like he pointing guns at kids and like unarmed civilians is not a problem for him. So, or any of them, like, but I think if it came to a point where their bluff was being called, I don't think anyone would have actually shot the kid. Might have shot the wife, but not the kid. Like Cinta might have shot the wife, like, because she seems the most hardened. I don't think this is the last we're seeing of her, right? I think there's a shot in some of the trailers where she's on Aldhani. She sees a Star Destroyer pass over. So I think she's not the last we see of her. So she gets away clean, basically, at the end of this episode.
And that's the thing about this plan, because what we do now is at this point, once they shoot Pettigar and they tell Jayhorn, effectively they call his bluff that he can't open up the vault, whereas they know they can because Lieutenant Gorn has given the information. You end up in like the heist proper, which isn't. It's a standard heist. It feels like what a bank robbery would be. Mm-hmm. You've got like 14 minutes to kind of get in and out. They when they open the vault, and you just see sort of the rolls of what look like effectively gold, like casino chips. Or something along those lines.
Credits. This is, I think, I can't recall seeing the depiction of actual, Star Wars credits en masse like this scene.
Well, the soldiers are playing. Well, the people who are working by the vault, who aren't out watching the eye, because it's like a very much a skeleton crew, because everyone is out, as explained in previous episodes. They've got some credits when they're playing the card game. It is,
I think also apparently in Solo we've seen it, but like I'm talking like this amount of money is like it's like, wow, to see it like in that form, like that much together is like pretty. I think they're playing Sabacc, by the way.
Yeah, you're right.
Which is like the famous card game in Star Wars, which is very popular. This is how Han Solo gets the Millennium Falcon from Lando Calrissian. Is playing Sabacc. So it's I like those are those details where it's like, hey, this is like a really cool sci-fi heist movie. Wait, it's Star Wars because they're playing Sabacc. And there's another couple other moments like that where like I'm reminded that I'm watching Star Wars, and it's just the greatest feeling to see something like this good. And it's like, oh, it's Star Wars too. That's awesome.
It's funny because the heist is very un-Star Wars, as you would imagine it to be. Well, I mean, you say that actually. I mean, so Cinta's up on the deck, keeping an eye on some of the hostages and making sure to switch off the comms and switch off the overall kind of.
They have to be careful about the Alkani base, which is where the Imperial garrison is, which is where the TIE fighters are. And we see them later, obviously. And that would be the other moment is when the TIE fighters appear. We'll get to that, but this is This is great. Because they just, their plan is to just it's not to get all the money. It's just get as much money as they can get on board the ship with the help of the crew. I think they're crew, but also guards, the Imperial guards that are working there.
Do you have Supermarket Sweep? The TV
I
game show.
I think I've seen something like this, but I couldn't tell you if we actually have our own version here or not.
It's very much that, just with credits and rolls of them. And except they're not pulling, if you're being forced at gunpoint to do someone else's shopping, as the situation is here, because they're quite canny in that, aren't they? It makes sense to use them to rob the place, but it has the kind of like traditional casino heist vibe to it. If you're gonna rob
it's
a
interesting they don't have like I guess service droids or like heavy lifting droids, because I think they would just like hijack those and just make them do it. But
budget cutbacks, just throw that out there.
For by the Imperials, probably. Yeah. You guys don't get the droids. You do all the heavy lifting yourselves. Probably just got like those mouse droids that roll around and do, basic maintenance and stuff like that, like vacuuming or something.
It's and as soon as the base is like sort of plunged in the darkness, we end up seeing that they've realized there's a guy who's up in one of the sentries, and he's got the radio there, and he realizes that they've been hacked and manages to listen to the communication between Vel and Cinta. And so at that point they burst in as the robbery's going on, and we end up in a firefight in which Gorn is first of all killed. We have a situation then. I think this is like the first kind of foreshadowing. I didn't realize it at the time. It was only when watching it again. But the death of Taramin, who yells "cover me" to Skeen, who doesn't like cover him. He does a couple of shots and then tucks himself back in. At which point Taramin is shot from above. Then we've got Vel there as well, Nemik, and then there's a sort of burly guy who's clearly had eyes for having a fight with Cassian, who's been getting the ship ready, which is his role the entire time, getting that ready for them to go. They have a bit of a set to, of which then Nemik manages to shoot him, and you have a whole big, they manage to close up in there with Nemik, Skeen, Vel and Cassian flying the ship as they're prepared to go out. And because the way that it works in terms of the ship going out, a load of the credits fall back and kind of crush Nemik, who's there, who ends up being dragged out but can't feel his legs. And I haven't mentioned it at all at this point, we have seen it, but this is where we do get to see the eye and the interactive experience of the eye as well. The sort of spectacular event. And what did you make of it? Because this is the big FX heavy part of the show.
I thought it was great. I mean, I would one day like to go see the Aurora Borealis in the northern part of Canada at some point, like go up to like the Northwest Territories or Yellowstone and experience in the winter, because you got to experience the minus 40 degrees Celsius weather, of course, as well. Yeah. But I would love to do like go to a cabin, rent a cabin up there, or something like resort or something like that.
Feeling you're much more you'd be much more conditioned for that than I would. Yeah.
But and then just watch the Northern Lights, and I feel like this is kind of like Star Wars version of like what seeing the Northern Lights might be like. Like it's a religious experience for the Aldani and including the troopers that are watching over them. They're just transfixed by this experience. But for Cassian, he doesn't care. It's like it's an obstacle in his way, because he's got all this. He wants to complete his mission, and for them, it's their cover. It's how they're going to escape, because we do see, like, in response to this heist, like the Alcani garrison base, there's something wrong. We got to go out there right now. And we see 3 TIE fighters, and it's great. We see how they get into their TIE fighters. We see Imperial TIE fighter pilots, which is like, can I just say, Imperial TIE fighter pilots. If I was ever going to do Star Wars cosplay as a stormtrooper, I wouldn't do a stormtrooper. I would do an Imperial TIE fighter pilot, because they're so fucking cool.
Yeah. They do look probably. There's a big kind of heavy, I won't say Top Gun vibe to them as well. there, but it's great because it gives it a little caption, doesn't it, of Al-Khani,
Yeah.
and it doesn't need to do that, but it does do that.
And we see how they prep to
Yeah.
launch the TIE fighters. They like flipping all this. And I can I just tactile switches, buttons. There's no like touch screens really. It's great. It's so Star Wars. Like why would we assume like in another galaxy, this is, like they would all have like touch screens or holographic, like Iron Man level technology that we see in the MCU. Of course, no, it's very possible. Like it's tactile.
It's like Watchmen, the brilliant HBO series, and the idea of this, like the internet never being something that's invented. It's a case where it's landlines and what do you call them? Not buzzers. What would they call
beepers, pagers.
Pages. And the idea that that isn't a technology that's there, and society manages to still kind of manages to function and exist. But yeah, I mean, the sequence here that we have with Nemec giving kind of directions, because he can't tell him where to go. I think he tells him to go right up. So he's right in the middle of the eye, which, for those of you who haven't seen it, just massive, like what effectively look like comets.
Like kind of mini meteors, kind of.
Yeah, mini meteors, which are entirely like kind of brightly colored, just going across the sky. It is like it's where visuals are at their best, because it is very, very good, but it's not like kind of ridiculous. You've been built up for a couple of episodes that this needs to be spectacular enough that it's going to have the attention of everyone, and they deliver with that. Yeah. And it also then provides the cover as they're trying to get away from the TIE fighters as well, and dipping up, going all the way up above it and then going down. And all the while, the 3 TIE fighters then end up destroyed, because it appears to be like effectively just the G-force ends up kind of like crushing them. The TIE fighters themselves can't handle getting up that
They
high.
Can't maneuver around the meteorites, kind of, because like the purpose of Nemec is that he can use this old technology that is not affected by the radiation of the eye flying through the eye. Whereas like you see like the TIE fighter pilots, they cannot use their instrumentation. It's all scrambled, and they're not used to necessarily using just line of sight flying, I suppose, necessarily. But you need some kind of instrumentation that is kind of older, that is not like more low tech is better in this case, and that Nemec knows how to use low tech. And he makes a point when we first meet Nemec and he's talking to Cassian, he makes a point of like, the Empire wants us to rely on their technology to take away our freedoms. That's why I like this kind of navigation device, because it's old school, and like you don't need to rely on things that are too high tech, that are, would seemingly be like, top of the line with Imperial technology, but it doesn't help them regardless, because they're able to elude 3 TIE fighters, with top of the line sensors, and because in a hauler, and basically a truck, because they have a lower level of technology that's going to help them evade the Empire, which is kind of like the philosophy of the Empire, of the rebellion, because like they're the TIE fighter, like the X-wing fighters are kind of like old school fighters. Hold on a sec. Sorry, just had to sort out my dinner later. There.
Well, you have to, mate. It's the most important meal of the day. You don't need to be apologizing for that.
But it's kind of like the philosophy of the rebellion, isn't it? Like using like more kind of outdated technology to fight, because that's what's at hand. Like X-wing fighters are top of the line, but at the same time, they're kind of, like there is this idea that they're like kind of older style fighters that are like older than TIE fighters are.
And this is where we get back to the kind of real world allegories. If you're thinking of like insurgencies in countries, whether it's like, say, the Viet Cong in the Vietnam War, or in Afghanistan, where you're using conditions and the terrain to kind of suit it, and you're able to think that bit more freely. Whereas within a rigid bureaucracy and a certain way of doing it, it's like you can do the overwhelming might thing, but it doesn't really work. So they, the thing they had to take into consideration, that they have to, once they're in the eye, that effectively, as long as they've got a pilot who's good enough to go along with it, they're going to be able to escape. And in fairness to them, I think it was different to what I expected the heist to be, because it was a lot more generally lo-fi, but I think it's all the better for it. And as something that, like, you were waiting to see what it was, it built it up for 2 episodes. I think they delivered.
Oh, I have no complaints about it, because I was feeling the tension of, are they going to succeed? Obviously they are. That it's like, who's not going to survive? That's kind of the tension that you're
That's
gonna.
where the tension is.
The tension is, and it's like pretty much from the moment it starts, it's like, okay, now I'm tense, like, because you know he's gonna die. You just know he's gonna die, but you really want Nemec to survive.
You do. I mean, they've given him a med. Vel gives him a med spike, like while they're escaping, and there's a point where Skeen convinces them all they need to go to the doctor, because the kid is the reason why they're all here, why they're doing it. And they take him to the doctor, which is, and again, this is one of the few sort of special effects characters who are there. But the doctor, and it makes sense, who they've taken him to, and they've taken a kind of pit stop, has got 4 arms.
Yeah, his name is Dr. Quadpaw.
Quadpaw. He's
right.
cracking. Like, right. if you're in a bind, he's definitely the guy to go and see. But as that's going on, Skeen has a conversation outside with Cassian, where basically proposes to him that he's lied about a lot of his story, and that there's approximately 80 million in credits there, 40 million each, which then would explain why he doesn't decide to actually cover Taramyn, because that's one less person to have to deal with or share it with. And I think he sees Cassian as being like-minded to him as well. But yes, he has that proposition. And then as he starts to go through his plan, and he thinks Cassian's going to go along with it, he pulls a gun on him and shoots him halfway through. And this happens at the same time that Nemec dies. And then we have a sequence where Andor goes in. Vel thinks, obviously, he's there to kind of rob them blind. And he says, actually, I just want my cut. And he offers to buy Dr. Quapa, if I've said his name right, and decides to, he wants to buy his ship in order to escape from there, and just take his 200,000 and disappear. And at this point, she says, okay, gives him, says, Nemec wanted you to have his manifesto, which, again, when you spoke earlier on, WH, about the seeds of this, the seeds of Cassian Andor's sort of transformation into a true believer, it's like he has been literally given a holy book from someone who has died to save the sins of the entire galaxy, to rescue them, if we can go into more sort of Christ-like stuff.
I hope this book is passed on to Princess Leia in somehow.
Princess first, don't they? Yes.
Because she seems like she'd be the kind of person, like, as she grows older, that would find this manifesto and like, oh my God, this is everything I believe in. Like, she seems like the Nemec type of rebel.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the way that this is done. I mean, it makes sense with Skeen, and that he would have lied all the stories about why he said he was there and to do with his brother and such like as well. It makes sense for that. And like, you're waiting for the kind of the idea that everyone's going to kind of betray themselves, but it just shows what a good man Andor is. And Nemec is smart.
He's smart. It's like he knows, like, okay, if I don't kill Skeen, there's a good chance he's going to kill me. Yeah,
because that's the way it works. Wherever they go, he's going to shoot him, so he has the 80 million. Because why leave a witness?
Yeah, and he's going to kill Vel. He's going to probably kill the doctor. So he's like, like he for all his, I guess kind of foibles, he is very honorable man, like
Mm,
Cassian. So like he tells her, like, listen, I killed him. Oh, and she doesn't believe that Scheme was gonna, would do that. Like he would try to take the money for himself and leave them. And he's like, you have to really think about this. Because like I think in Cassian's life, he's just dealt with so many like underhanded, scummy people who are
yeah,
untrustworthy, and he's seen people like Skeen, and like like he's also like he recognizes all his prison tattoos, and it's like, okay, like I know how this is gonna go. If I don't take you out, you're gonna kill me and
yeah,
Vel. And Cassie says, I'm just gonna take the money I'm owed, which is 200,000. He's gonna give 30 of that to the doctor, take it whatever ship he has in the barn. Which I just love that idea. Like, hey, how much for the car? Your car?
yeah.
I'll give you this much money. It's double what it's worth. And
It
and he seems the Doctor Quadpaw seems a little offended by, wow, how dare you?
it's like I'm reminded of the Doctor in John Wick that he goes to see as well, and it's this idea you're kind of bartering with this kind of like illegal doctor. It's kind of it's again it's a movie trope, but it's
Yeah.
one that I always kind of enjoy.
Played
As
by the keymaker in the Matrix Reloaded, by the way.
yes,
Yes, the Doctor in John Wick Part 3, I believe.
yeah,
And by the way, I'm looking at the Dr. Quadpaw's actor. His name is Aiden Cook. He's been in quite a few. He's in Rogue One as the character of Two Tubes, Benthic, one of the Saw Gerrera's top lieutenants in the Partisans. And he's a character called Bulio in The Rise of Skywalker. He's also played many different characters in Doctor Who, including a Zygon and a Cyberman. So yes, Aiden Cook has a lot of experience wearing a lot of makeup.
yeah.
Special effects.
He's doing all right for himself, isn't he? I mean, he's certainly like he's a big part of Star Wars. He appears to be all over that. He's made sure my God, he's probably got as more appearances than like Mark Hamill, really, at this point with him. He's just taking over. We then switch away. We end up with, we switch away and then we go to Coruscant. And the first person we see is Mon Mothma.
Yes.
In the Senate.
In a very empty looking Senate.
Very empty looking Senate.
It kind of looked like half the arena of like AW's Dynamite in Chicago and Rampage when I was there live, and it's like, okay, this half's pretty full, this half's empty. That's kind of what the Senate looked like.
Well, it's livelier than a rampage taping but certainly by the sounds of it. But in some ways, I think that's what politics is when they're discussing stuff that is probably seen in terms of the Gorman. When her standing up for Gorman rights, it's probably seen as this low-key minority issue that most members of the Senate aren't going to turn up for, as you see that happens in the House of Commons here, where you just have people sort of effectively feels like they're kind of talking to themselves. But we have this here, and as she's talking, she notices that people are distracted, and she checks the news, at which point, we then cut to the to Luthen's antique dealership, and I think this is another, like, I was reading about this, that there's an item from the planet Deveron, which is the homeworld of the Deveronians. Do you know about these guys?
Yeah, so they're like the devil-looking characters in Star Wars. You see one in A New Hope in the Cantina, Mos Eisley. You see, who is it? I think it's what's his name? Clancy Brown, who is the like the evil bad guy in the first Highlander movie, which oddly enough casts a Frenchman as a Scottish person and a Scottish person as a Spaniard. It's very fascinating that. But yes, he plays a Deveronian in there, and they're like, they're quite popular in the comics. Some characters are Deveronians in the comics that are so that they have, like, I like these little references to like Star Wars planets that we've heard of before, like Deveron, or like if they mention the planet Zeltron, or this is like a undersea rare undersea seashell from the planet Dak, which is like the home of the Mon Calamari. That'd be nice to hear something like that as well. But I mean, like, even like Lupin Rail's starship is from Fondor, which is like in the battle. I think Battlefront video game with Inferno Squad. Like that's a ship. That's a different shipyard to the ones that Kuat and some other more famous shipyards that we hear about in Star Wars. So that they made this ship that Luthen Rail. We're gonna see more of. I can't wait. Like I love this ship. We're gonna see more of this ship. Is from this shipyard versus like it's from Corellia or Kuat. Is really nice little touch for adding to Star Wars lore.
Oh, we're definitely seeing that ship, and I agree with you. I think it's an interesting role, a very deliberate role, where you've got him as someone who has to know about the universe, which kind of then feeds into like his inspiration for wanting to be part of the rebellion and knowing about lots of these places. And your theory, which you were saying from day one, that he's a Jedi in hiding, but we do see him in a very sort of human way, because as he's showing one of the customers the Devorian kind of necklace where no one knows the language, so it can mean whatever you want the inscription to mean. He's asked if he's got anything from Aldani, which takes him by surprise, and it's either the guy's either the other customer's partner, whoever, but says there's a big rebel attack. So there's already the idea of a rebel alliance. Yeah, that's something that's still even possibly in its infantry, but it's
a rebellion. Like there's rebel cells. You know this much. There's rebel cells. There's different kind of versions of the rebels. Like we have Saw Gerrera's version of the rebels, which are more kind of extremists and terrorists. Like you have like the rebellion, the rebellion. I think remnants of the separatist movement are still around, because we hear mention of, like Cassian mentioned them to Luthen Rail. But it's pockets. There's a rebellion going on, but it's not the alliance. It's not the rebel. What we consider to be the rebel alliance, right? Yeah. So yet, because for that to happen, I think like Mon Mothma has to become its kind of head of its state, the state of the alliance to oppose the Empire, like politically.
We've seen her reaction of sort of of it coming through. We see Luthen's reaction at the very, very end with him bursting out laughing, like the kind of sense of relief that they've managed to do this and that the Empire has taken a big hit. However, we do see just before then, we go over to the Imperial Security Bureau, where Major Partagaz calls everyone in, all of the middle management, and says they're going to be there at midnight for a presentation. They're not going anywhere, and effectively want to know what the fuck has happened. Yeah. So we're going to be seeing a response, and it's very clear that it's going to be brutal, and they're not going to be playing games on this one.
I would love if we just got a cameo from Grand Moff Tarkin as giving a presentation. It's him, like, which would make the most sense. It wouldn't necessarily be Vader or the Emperor. I think it would be to like Grand Moff Tarkin, where Tarkin's like, because he's pretty much the military leader of the Empire, right? So whereas like Darth Vader's more the enforcer. I think with Tarkin's death in New Hope, Vader becomes the military leader of the Empire, as well as like being the Emperor's like enforcer. But at this point, still I think still be Tarkin.
It's like Grand Moff Tarkin is very much like the highest ranking kind of bureaucrat. Of everyone in there. So,
but because he started out in the army, in the military of the Republic, which we see in the Clone Wars cartoon.
Yes,
that he's also a military leader as well. Like he has military powers. Like he can command troops, and he can order around admirals and generals and things like that. It's why like he is in a higher position to, like in Rogue One, we see higher position to, Orson Krennic, who's a director of the development of the Death Star. But Tarkin just says, "I'm taking over because you're not a military leader. I am." So,
and if he does make an appearance, I think it's the technology as such as we saw in season 2 of The Mandalorian, where they can do a kind of a very credible version of Peter Cushing, as Grand Moff Tarkin.
Especially if it's just like on a holo screen, like in the that you could easily do it and just get away. Yeah,
That'd be
the
like,
people like Grand Moff Tarkin was a great addition to Rogue One. I think the actor
yeah,
and the technology used to bring that character to life in Rogue One was fantastic. I don't really see too many flaws with it. The more the like Princess Leia is a little bit more wonkier for her, even for her short appearances, because they
mm,
obviously spent all the money on Tarkin because they had to.
yeah,
So
yeah. And that brings us to the end of the episode. The Eye. Do you have any thoughts on that kind of end sequence? Where we are next week? Where do you think we're going from here?
it's kind of up in the air, isn't it? Because like Cassian says, "I'm out. Like I did my bit. I'm taking my cut, and I'm out. You can do whatever the rest." But like I've watched the trailers
Mm,
for the entire series, and like we haven't seen the last of Vel. We haven't seen the last of Cinta. So Vel's going to show up again.
yeah,
I think probably in a different role, working for Luthen Rail. Like
yeah.
obviously we're going to see more of Luthen Rail. There's like two sequences like that are going to be in future story arcs. One is back on Ferrix, and I'm assuming, my guess is that sequence is going to be the last story arc, because it would make more sense to start there and then end there, like to kind of bookend
Yeah.
the series with like start like beginning on Ferrix and going back to Ferrix. And then there's like a sequence, like a story arc seemingly where he's breaking into a prison, or he's in prison and he's got to break out. Like it looks like, like this prison looks like it's like Camino, like where the clone troopers are created. Like
Oh
I don't know if
yeah.
you've seen the teaser trailers for the series, but there's a point where he's wearing like a off-white uniform, like it looks like a prison uniform.
Okay.
And I don't know if he's breaking into the prison to break somebody out, or if he's actually got caught and like he's Luthen Rail sent someone to break him out. Or it's interesting. I think that's the next story arc, is that
Yeah.
it's going to be this prison breakout. And I'm just really curious, because I do think Ferrix will be the last story arc of this particular season until we get to season 2. And I gotta assume by like my kind of also curiosity about where we're going with Mon Mothma is like is at some point she's gonna is it gonna match up with the Rebels cartoon where she is smuggled out of the away from the Empire, out of Coruscant, to go to become the public leader of the Rebel Alliance with the crew of the Ghost. I wonder, because like I think it would make more sense that by this time she's kind of like sending Andor on his missions
Yeah.
as an official member of the Alliance. But we'll see. It's like I'm enjoying her journey as well in this. Like, and Genevieve O'Reilly is doing such a great job as Mon Mothma, from her kind of like the fading of her idealism as a member of the Senate to try to oppose the Empire that way, to becoming like I have to help fund Luthen Rail's rebels and this and that. And it's I think it's just such a richly there's so much rich material in terms of the writing, and I feel like if you're an actor given this material, like you're going to be in Star Wars, but here's the kind of stuff you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Like they'd be like, wow, this is great. This is like a proper drama.
Yeah.
But in Star Wars, and it's like I get to say these things. I have to get to work with these other actors who are like, I imagine like I saw Genevieve O'Reilly like saying on an interview, like she's like the fact that she gets to do scenes with Stellan Skarsgård is like is amazing to her, because he's such a well-regarded actor and he's been in so many things. Like, and like what are the opportunities you get to work with Stellan Skarsgård that often, especially have scenes like dialogue scenes with him, is pretty cool. And then hey, it's for Star Wars. That's really unique.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I mean, I'd say shout out again for Susanna White, director on this episode, and the great Tony Gilroy scripts. It's a like it really is like what I'm enjoying about this in particular is, like you say, it can go anywhere from next week. There are these different directions can see them going in. I need to go back and scan those teaser trailers again. I probably didn't watch them in enough detail, but like I think overall it's less kind of beholden to other kind of Star Wars properties and entities and other films, such like, other than it has a finite ending point with the beginning of Rogue One, but at the same time they've kind of got a lot of freedom and a lot of scope to tell a different type of story here. and I just think sort of kudos to them as well. They've managed to get things in there. I mean, I've seen some criticism that it feels kind of like not as slow, but I think that feels still very much like very much a minority opinion on this. This is generally like, I'm thinking to myself, the potential for this at this stage is where it goes this second half. How does it kick into that other gear? Do we see the political change? Obviously, with Mon Mothma and the kind of almost like the dissolution of the Senate. As you know, are we going to end up in those? You know, Saul Guerrero, you know, kind of working his way back in as well. So we've got all of that to look forward to.
Got a lot of things to look forward to. Like, I don't want to like, I know it's in the trailers, but if you haven't seen the trailers, I don't want to spoil it for people. But I these trailers are good in the sense that they build anticipation for what's going to be coming, and like I'm excited to see what we're going to get this coming Wednesday. It's Wednesday, this coming Wednesday.
Yeah.
And then, you know, how it's going to end. We got 6 more episodes left, I believe, right? It's 12-parter, or is it?
Yeah.
It's a 12-parter. So we got another 6 episodes. So we got another 6 weeks left, which is going to take us into basically into the end of November. So
yeah.
And then
I'm all right with it.
I think January or February we're gonna get The Mandalorian.
Yep.
Season 3. I'm excited about that. And I think in between that we're gonna get this cartoon, the Tales of the Jedi cartoon. Which I think if you want to review that, I think we can review that as a series, like as a whole, instead of like episode by episode, because like the episodes are like under 20 minutes each.
Yeah.
They're very short. So I thought we can just like talk about that after when it airs, binge it, and then just talk about the whole thing. Because I think it's very focused on like the characters we've seen before, like Count Dooku is a big part of this when he's a Jedi, which is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Young Qui-Gon Jinn as his Padawan, and I think young Ahsoka as a child, and like that's great. Like I'm excited to see that. The Bad Batch is going to come back for season 2. And I think 2023 is going to be a massive year with. I believe we're going to get Mandalorian. We're going to get Mandalorian season 3. We're going to get Ahsoka. We're going to get I think we're going to get Andor season 2. Probably like a tail end, like the fall of 2023. Like we're having it now, season 1. So, and probably I'm assuming that they're finally going to announce some like movies, like big screen stuff in 2023, because apparently Rian Johnson is still negotiating, is still like signed on to direct his own trilogy of Star Wars movies.
Okay.
Of what era they're in, who knows? But that hasn't been killed. Like the Game of Thrones creators, their show was canceled.
Yeah.
They're like, we're not doing that anymore. Probably because probably Kathleen Kennedy probably saw the last season of Game of Thrones and didn't like it either, like a lot of other people. But like Rian Johnson is still slated to do his own trilogy, and apparently it's just a matter of timing. It's just trying to figure out the timing because he is busy with the new Knives Out film that's just going to be released. I'm excited about that. I loved the first one.
Oh, I am. He's being paid stupid money for this, though, isn't he? It's like it's a ridiculous kind of like, I know that they've put in an obscene amount of money towards it, haven't they, Netflix? But yeah, I love the first one. It reminds me of Clue, which for those of you old enough to remember that, a film version of a board game that really shouldn't have worked and might be the best version of a board game. Brought to
like, Daniel, and we're getting to a Knives Out conference, but Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc is very much a classic like Private Eye character.
Yeah, proper gumshoe stuff.
Yeah, it's good. I like it. I'm excited in this, and it's like another friendly cap for good old Dave Bautista to be in something like this as well.
He does it. He's gonna win an Oscar. That's like the train. I somehow see it happening. I don't know why. He'll take some low budget indie role and it will just connect one year. And we'll all sit there and go, that bloke was Dave Bautista, was Deacon Bautista.
That's right.
What is going on?
It'd be great.
So
career.
That brings us to the end of this episode.
Yes.
Neatly into an hour as well. That was glorious stuff. But where can the good folks find you, WH?
Yeah, of course, over at Post Wrestling. Post Perez, Long and Winding Road. Trying to line up some really cool guests for the last 2 episodes of this year. Working on that, so I've been kind of occupied. We got some news, you know about this. I can't say anything right now until it's
Yeah.
actually done, but we got some cool news regarding some stuff there. MCU later, we just wrapped up She-Hulk.
Yes.
And we're going to be doing Werewolf by Night, me and Rich Fan, just ourselves. And then in November, we're going to do Black Panther, Wakanda Forever with myself, Rich Fan, Scrump from PWT Cast. It was the original idea, but now Wei can join us. He got a babysitter, so you can go see it in theater. So you can join us for that. And we're trying to get, I think, Nate Milton to join us for a 5-person panel for that. So it's probably going to be 7 hours long. You know, what Rich Fan calls the Will Cooling effect of just making a podcast longer than it has to be.
he will do. Admittedly, I am very much guilty of those crimes as well. But that sounds tremendous, as well as the upcoming post wrestling meetup.
November, what is it? I think it's the 19th. November 19th in Newark, New Jersey. You can go to postwrestling.com to find out more information about that. There's going to be a live podcast with John, Wade, Braden, and Davey from Up Next. And I'm not part of that. I'm going to be in the audience. I was either offered the option of sitting in the audience with other people, post representatives who aren't going to be part of the podcast necessarily, and or going to the green room and just watching from there or listening from there and drinking alcoholic beverages. But I think I might try to sit in the front row and heckle. That's, and then there's a VIP segment where you get to, if you pay for the VIP, I will actually maybe talk to you, maybe. Or I was thinking, like, here's the thing I was thinking of, and I pitched it to Wei, like, get a waiver. Okay. Get a waiver, and you pay me directly $5, and I will slap you Inoki style and transfer some of my fighting spirit into you. But I was thinking fighting sarcasm,
so a big line in Newark walking towards you.
And I'm not talking about I'm talking like that. I get proper like transferring some fighting spirit, some WH Park fighting spirit into you.
With the spirit of Antonio Inoki bringing you on.
That's right.
Brilliant stuff. Obviously, you'll hear myself on Spotlight, which we were recording on Wednesday this week because there's an episode of Dynamite on Tuesday night. So we're doing it there and then. But yes, if you also want to listen to much more of our stuff, go to patreon.com/Grapple. So until next time, WH.
Bye there.
Bye there.